Welcome to the Divinely Human podcast.
I am Aleisha.
And I'm Tanita.
This podcast is where deep dives and real life collide.
Where we open the sealed section from the cosmic to the chaotic. Let's dive in.
Hello and welcome back to another episode. Today, I don't know what time it is. What time is it?
2 o'clock.
It's past midday now. It's 2 o'clock. But welcome back to this beautiful episode. I know that I've been looking forward to this because, as you guys know, we're doing a little series on each one of us at the moment. Mine was released last week, and this week it is beautiful Tanita's turn to tell her story and just to dive into her world and, you know, what she's experienced and how she has gotten to where she is today and what's shaped her. And I'm really excited for this because even though I feel like I've known you for a lifetime and I do have some kind of idea about your life, I think in this setting, holding the right space for something like this is really special, and it enables you to share in a safe space as well. So I'm really looking forward to it. And thank you for letting me do this with you.
Of course, when you said last week, you know, you couldn't imagine doing this with anybody else. I'm like, that's exactly how I feel. Like, I genuinely, I'm glad we have this space to open up. So thanks.
So just as well, just a quick little trigger warning as well. I didn't write it out like you had it last week, but same goes for this week in terms of just being aware that there may be things mentioned in this episode to do with mental health, childhood trauma. What else did you have on the list from last week that we mentioned?
just the works, really. Anything triggering.
Yeah, just anything potentially triggering. Please just listen with discernment. And if you are in a sensitive space, maybe recommend not listening to this episode or skipping it. So just wanted to pop that out there before we proceed on with today. So
Yes.
How are you feeling?
Very good. I feel good. I actually had a therapy session last night for the first time in a while, and I feel really calm today. You know, like,
I feel that off you, yeah.
Yeah, it feels good. It feels really good. And I cleaned my house this morning, so that feels really good.
That always feels good. That always feels good. So you know me, I like to do things in a linear fashion, but I feel like I want to just. You're probably going to be feeling like you're being like thrusted into the deep end right now, but I really want to just get an idea, especially for the listeners. You know, like, what was a day in your life as a child like? Like, what did it look like? What were you like navigating? Like, what did it look like day to day for you as a child growing up?
I appreciate this question, but I genuinely can't answer it. I don't remember my childhood. I have maybe 3 or 4 memories that I remember, but yeah, it's really challenging to remember my childhood. It's just literally not there. From what I've been told by both my parents and my other family members, it was quite a toxic environment. There was a lot of time where I was spent alone or managing other people, like my parents' emotions. There was quite a high, intense energy place. I do have a memory of, like, my earliest memory is probably when I can't exactly remember. I might have been 4. And I used to see a man outside of so we had my room was at the front of the house, and there was our front door right next to my bedroom. And I would every night get up and go to the toilet, which was down the hallway, and I'd look out and there was always a man standing there trimming the hedges. And I remember being a child and thinking, like, I was so scared and I didn't know what was happening. And I told my parents, and I remember going into my parents' house one night and saying, like, there's a man out the front, like, he's terrifying. And they would say, no, no, it's fine. It's nobody's there, nobody's there. And after that, yeah, the only memory I have is when my mum was pregnant with my brother. And we have about 6 years between us. So yeah, I don't remember a whole lot. But that man out the front wasn't actually a man. It was we did some research just a couple of years ago, and it was the previous owner of the house. He'd had a heart attack while cutting his hedges. So yes.
That was going to be my next question, was that actually a man, or were you tapping into your like intuitive side from a young age? And I suppose that answers that question.
Yes.
Um, it's really interesting, how, because I sense with you that you were kind of in that fight or flight mode from a pretty young age, considering you were, you know, just, enough, like just seeing like a guy out the front of your house cutting hedges, like that was enough to have you in fight or flight mode, right?
Totally.
And I wonder, like, do you feel like your intuitive side was almost like squeezed out, and like you developed that quite early as kind of a protection tactic?
I actually, yes, I know what you're trying to say with this question is like, because my dad, he relied on alcohol a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He's not diagnosed an alcoholic or anything. However, I would definitely nod my head profusely to that if somebody asked. Um, so we in that environment as a kid, I think you're hyper aware of what's going to happen. Is his emotions going to shift? How's my mum feeling? You're just hyper vigilant, hyper aware. And I think that really opened me up because there were times where, I was alone. I was an only kid for 6 years. And when I think back on my childhood, I feel a lot of loneliness and just a lot of time spent in separation. And I think in that time, I've got a very active imagination. And I think it definitely opened me up a lot, especially to spirits and to that more, spiritual, intuitive side. But I will say, I didn't have a lot of experiences that I remember with that spiritual side that were pleasant or happy. Like after my brother was
Mm.
born, I would have premonitions about my cat getting hit by a car or my neighbor hurting my cat, and it would happen, and I didn't know how to deal with this emotion. I didn't understand like why my mind was telling me something was going to happen, and nobody around me could confirm or deny whether it did, and it ended up did
Mm.
happening. My cat passed away, and there were many times like that as a child, between when my brother was born and me even now, having those premonitions but not having anything to make me feel safe in that. um,
Yeah.
there were times where, like mum said, when my great grandmother passed away, and even my grandmother, apparently I would call out their name in the middle of the night, and I'd be sitting up and talking to them, and I would giggle and say, stop hugging me so hard. And mum said it was really beautiful to watch those, but she was obviously terrified. Like, she was also not in a space to hold that for me. And I totally respect that, because I think if you are not grounded within yourself, opening up to that world can be fucking terrifying. And I totally get that.
Mm. Yeah, that is really, it's understandable in a sense as well. I think that dynamic for you was almost like you were the you were the point of difference in your lineage, where it was like you were the first one to come along and kind of activate that way, but also like nurture that thing for yourself, not necessarily have that support of the people around you, but you were able to come to this point where you were able to nurture that at some point in your life to kind of shift the path forward, I suppose, right?
It's funny you bring that up. My So my dad's dad, I was talking to him about this maybe a couple of years before I got pregnant, when I really started to dive into spiritual work, like as an adult. And I was explaining to
Mhm.
him, like, I just don't feel like I'm fully tapped into my abilities. And he's like, don't you remember? And I'm like, no, like, please remind me. And he said he can actually astro travel. And he was saying as a kid, I would come over after being, away for the week, and I would tell him what he ate for dinner on Thursday night. And I would tell him, like, what my nana was doing and all of this stuff. And he said, you were doing it as a child. And it's funny because he hadn't talked about that with any of the other family, but it was really just a genuine moment of like having that connection. I think he was probably the first person in my family, and possibly even still, mum and I, we like read tarot now and stuff, but who share that connection. So yeah, it's really funny that you mentioned that, because that didn't wasn't revealed to me until later in life. And it's like, even still,
Mm.
it's tough. Like, it's tough not having family or support that really understand what you're going through from a spiritual sense, because it impacts so many different aspects of your life.
Yeah, it does. It washes over every single domain within your life, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, I can't imagine how that. It's crazy. Like I'll just say it, but I feel like a lot of young women who kind of move through what you've moved through, they grow up and they just disregard all of that. Whereas you're able to really bring strength to that, regardless of, you know, the lack of support and nurturing that came externally. Like, I just think it's so profound that you're able to tap into that and like add to that rather than just grow up and it be something that really you rejected in a way, because I think that happens so often in family lines. And I suppose it makes me excited as well for you and your daughter as well. And, you know, just to see how that just, I don't know, unfolds throughout like that journey as well.
Yeah.
I want to know as well, because I know that you were kind of out of home from quite a young age. Like, where did you actually grow up, and like, do you feel up to sharing a little bit about that transition that you went through as well?
Yeah, totally. I moved a lot as a kid. I don't think we stayed in one place for more than, the longest time I've ever stayed somewhere was 5.5 years, and that was in Airlie Beach. That was in my high school years. So I moved there halfway through the beginning of the first year of high school. But I was actually born down in Ipswich. We moved around a lot, and then we moved up. My dad got a job in the mines, so we kind of followed the money. And we moved up there, up to Moranbah, and then something happened at school. I got bullied, and dad was, like, well, if you can't handle this, we'll just move. So we ended up moving to Airlie Beach. We lived there for, like I said, 5.5 years. And yeah, that was an experience in itself. But I think at that time, I mean, you're a teenager, you're trying to figure out who you are. And I think for so much of my life, not having a base to understand who I am, like really not remembering a lot of my childhood, left me really out of touch with my personality. And it left me feeling like I didn't know who I was. And of course, I didn't know this consciously at the time, but there was a lot of decisions that I made throughout my teenage years that would have me either attaching to the wrong crowds or letting people do things to me that otherwise now I would kick my fucking feet up about it. Like, I just let people honestly disrespect me because I didn't have any basis of self-worth, and I didn't feel like I had two legs to stand on. I really felt
Mm.
so like just not confident in myself, and like, who am I to tell somebody how they can treat me? Like, that just, it wouldn't even cross my mind to think that. And of course now looking back, that fucking breaks my heart. But my teenage years, there was a lot of partying, a lot of drugs, a lot of just letting silly people do silly things to me and not really understanding the consequences of that. But I also had been working since I was 13 years old. So there was something within me that said, like, you need to somehow create your own path. And I just did that through work. And so when it came time to moving out of home, I literally packed my bags like a week after I graduated and I was like, I am gone. And you know, when you make a decision, but you're like, there's no logic behind it, there's no understanding of how it's going to work. You're like, if I think about this
Mm.
too long, I'll think myself out of it. I
Yeah.
genuinely just like got in the car and I left. I went with my then boyfriend at the time. He and a girlfriend helped me move down here. So I would have been just, I was like, yeah, just turned 17 a couple of months prior, like earlier in that year. And then later that year, I moved. And it's funny because I moved down here. And I remember this boyfriend, he drove like 12 and a half hours with me, right? And my good friend at the time. And he stayed there for a couple of days after. And then it was time for him to go back. And he's like, oh, by the way, I've been cheating on you the whole 2 years we've been together. And I was like, you fucking kidding? So you can imagine, like, I've just left my family. The one relationship that I latched onto as a teenager has just said what has happened the last 2 years. And I just was so lost. I was so
Mm.
unsure of like how to live in a city, let alone because I grew up in small towns all my life,
Yeah.
let alone not knowing anybody. It was really, really
Wow.
challenging, but I'm so glad that I did it.
Such a vulnerable place to be in, especially when, yeah, as you said, like just being like taken to this new place and then had something like that connection severed immediately, pretty much after you get there. And then it's like, there you go. Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like, what what kind of like switched for you? Like, how did you kind of like move on to the path of like being more conscious and making different decisions and like motherhood and things like that? Like, what actually shifted to like enable your path to steer down there? Because I can see how easily it would have been for you to kind of keep going down that path that you were on, especially being a vulnerable at the time teenager as well. I just
Mm.
I feel like it would take such strength to like turn the ship around and kind of make those decisions to lead you to such a place of well, I mean, like now you relatively live like a pretty stable life and you have happiness and you do seem quite peaceful in yourself, like in who you are.
Yeah.
So I guess I want to ask, like, what shifted for you? Like, what steps did you take to get there? Like, what changed in your path?
That's a good question. I feel like, you know, it's funny. My mum, she'll always send me, like, you know, those Facebook memories. I have this old account that I completely just cut ties with because
One
I'm
of
like, it's
those.
so embarrassing.
Yeah.
And and she literally sent me one a couple of weeks, and it was like me as a 12-year-old going on a rant about like, you know,
Mm.
how life is a roller coaster and we have to stay conscious. And she always, like, her and all of my family, like my auntie and stuff, they always make fun of me and say that, you know, I was always so hyper aware and just like very open minded from a young age. I don't personally feel like I had that outlook, but when I was conversating with them, they said I was always like, they would always be like, how is this young girl talking like this? It is so random. Like, she's like a 90-year-old woman. And so I think on some level, I've just always been very open minded about the possibilities. And I think that's what's always
Mm.
kept me going is that faith. And yes, I've definitely lost faith multiple times in my life, but there's always this part of me that thinks like, but what if it gets better? But like, but what if
Mm.
it turns around? What if something changes? Like, it can't be like this forever. And I think I've seen how precious life is, that I'm just like, yeah, there's been really shitty situations, but fuck, like, I couldn't have been put on this earth to just experience that one side of thing. And I don't know, it's just this drive, and there's also a part of me that wants to like prove to my family that you don't have to be an outcome of your environment. I really want to prove that, especially for my kids, like you can do the work and you can change your outlook on life. You can change what's the past, like the effect that the past has on you. And that's always just been there. It doesn't mean that like I don't have days where I'm super reactive and emotional and stuck in all of that shit that's happened. But I think that's definitely been a core belief for me throughout my whole life, is like it has to get better. It fucking has to.
Yeah, it's like almost like you've had that underlying knowingness of like you subconsciously knew the path that you were going to take, but it was
Totally.
just in those times of absolute vulnerability, and a lot of the time I'm sensing a lot of fear growing up. It would be really hard to lose, like not lose sight of that. um and I mean, obviously, like from what you've shared, like your memory was a big protection thing for you. Like you just didn't remember, a lot of what, you know, your childhood was. Um, I'm curious to know whether you, like, how you view that, like whether you're grateful for that or whether you kind of wish that you did kind of have the ins and outs, or like, how do you feel about that?
You know what?
It's
Up
such a
until
hard
last
question.
Well, it's funny, it's a timely question because up until last night before I spoke to my therapist, I was like, I don't really care. I really genuinely
Mm,
don't care. If
mm,
if my
yeah.
mind has blocked it off, it's like, yeah, I can probably imagine like, no, thank you. I don't really want to revisit it. But my therapist said to me last night, she's like, yeah, the brain is good at blocking things off, but the body is not so good. So all of those
Yeah.
emotions and all of that experience is still stored within you. It's just
Yeah.
you can't remember it. And so up until last night, I genuinely would have said like, "Man, I don't really care. Like I'm doing fine without
Mm,
remembering."
yeah.
However, now that I have experienced pregnancy and just that whole experience, I'm kind of like, oh, I think the body is storing things. And
Mm,
that's a really soft, open wound. But I don't
mm-hmm.
know. I'm okay with going to those dark places, but I just think that like you have to be in the right mindset. And I think something that a lot of people in our space, in the spiritual community, in the self-development space, will always say like, oh, do the inner work, do the shadow work, like, yes, go for it. But I'm like, if you don't have the right resources, if you don't have the right support, and you are somebody who has experienced trauma, sometimes it can be damaging to
Yeah.
pull at those threads and unravel everything if you don't have that support system in place. And I think it's incredibly, incredibly important to take care of yourself as you're doing that inner work. And I just know I'm
Mm.
not at that place right now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And I think it's like such a huge realization to have. And it's a really good tool to sort of like acknowledge that as well, I think.
Mm.
It's super interesting when you said about storing stuff in the body, because it's something that's come up just recently for me as well in like
Really?
doing spinal energetic work with someone.
Mm.
And
Yes, I want to
just
hear more about that.
the effect it has on the body because of all of the energy that you do store in parts of your body. I went into it thinking like, you know how you see videos of people like moving around like crazy when
Yes.
they're receiving it? I was like, bullshit, that is like, they're acting, like it's not that crazy. So I went in like very skeptical, and I had a session a few weeks ago, and the way that my body was thrashing about and just
Really?
moving through, and just like my brain had no control over it. It was just absolute, like, it was just energetically, it just took over, and my body was
Wow.
releasing things that I was holding on to. And it really made me realize exactly what you just said about where we store all of this like trauma in our body and hurt and mistrust and a lot of our childhood memories, I've found, are stored within our body. And it's really confronting at times to realize that even though you've forgotten, the specifics and your memory is kind of a bit blurry, like
Hmm.
it's there still. It's there
Totally.
whether or not it's still knocking on the door, like just saying, please heal me
Yeah.
and release me. Like, just let me be free. um it's really synchronistic that you mentioned that you had that realization with your therapist as well.
Yeah.
That's a big one. It's a
It
really
is
big
a big
one.
one. I think after this pregnancy, I'll definitely want to do that. I think that sounds
Mm-hmm.
absolutely incredible because I've done inner child work and going back and revisiting
Mm-hmm.
my younger self, and that's been so healing on an emotional level. But
Yeah.
I think, yeah, now it's about taking it to that next stage and really just
Yeah.
releasing everything. And that's
Yeah.
really fascinating. I'll definitely have to explore that. You'll have to remind me in a couple of months.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely, I think too as well, like at the moment, having a pregnancy, you'd probably be hyper aware of everything as well. And
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
remember too, like a lot of stuff came up to be healed throughout my pregnancies in the past. So yeah, I'm not surprised that this is kind of like all bubbling up at the moment for you as well.
Yeah.
Um, I really want to ask you, like, your main, I guess, like, I don't know, I don't know how many, but I don't know, two or three people that you feel like have influenced you the most in your life.
Good question. Um,
It's a hard one. I
it's
struggle to answer this.
so hard. I think there have been people that have influenced me in a way where I'm like, ooh, don't want to go down that path. Like, thanks for
Mm-hmm.
showing me a road that I don't want to go down.
Mm-hmm.
And that's definitely a certain male figure in my family.
Mm-hmm.
So I am grateful for that because as challenging as that relationship has been, it's also taught me a lot about who I don't want to be and the life that I don't
Yeah.
want to live. But of course, my mum has definitely been a really incredible, influential person in my life. She's a Capricorn, so you can imagine just how strong willed she is sometimes. And it's funny because
Yes.
she holds back on the advice sometimes. And I'm like, I know you've got it in you and you better fucking give it to me. Like, and when she does, it is so good. So I love her for that. Um, but it's actually probably been my great grandmother who I don't actually remember much of. Like, I'm very spiritually connected to her. And at times where I'm like feeling really lost or out of touch, I will pray to her and I'll call her in and I'll chat with her. And her spirit's been really, really, really supportive for me, especially on that spiritual level. And she's really opened me up to like connecting with a lot of my ancestors too. And I think that just knowing what they've done for me and my family to be in the position that we are has been so incredibly motivating. Like getting to know their stories from like a spirit
Mm-hmm.
level and what they did and how their lives were, it just makes me think like, oh my God, I have so many opportunities and possibilities at my hand and I want to do them proud. But I also want to do my lineage proud and my children and
Yeah.
their children too. So I think, yeah.
That's so beautiful to have that relationship, even though she's in spirit. I feel I feel grateful for you.
Yeah, I definitely
I
do
think
too.
that that's just so special. A lot of people don't have that, and a lot of people never have answers about their ancestors, or their loved ones. So having that as a tool and just having her as a guide in general is just such a beautiful thing. um, I want to know if you were to go back and give yourself some advice when you were, I don't know, a child or, a teenager, like what would that advice be?
You know what came to mind? This is so kick him in the balls. Like literally just kick him and like move on with your life. I think I would go back to my teenage self and I would say you don't need to be hanging around these people. You don't need to be doing these things. You don't need to let people manipulate you into thinking that something's happening in a particular way when it's actually not. Like trust your gut,
Yeah.
trust your intuition, and get the fuck out. That's exactly what I would say, because I think that when we are looking for validation from other people, it really doesn't matter who gives it to us, right? If we don't have that validation within ourselves, we try and source it from any which way that we can get it, even from people who genuinely don't care about us in that moment, who couldn't give two craps about how you ended up. And so I would want to go back and tell my younger self, like, you matter and you can choose
Mm.
differently. And the validation that you're getting from these people will never, ever amount to the validation that when you give it to yourself. Like, that is
Mm.
like liquid gold, right?
Oh my goodness. That is powerful. That's huge. And it goes back to, I suppose, like you can only receive as much love as well as you're, willing to love and dote on yourself. It's impossible. And
Yeah.
we try. I think in our naive years, we try so hard to seek that from everywhere else. And ourself is like the last person that we call upon. And sometimes, I don't know whether you agree with me, but I just feel like going back and just slapping myself in the face saying, wake up, like you're the
Literally.
key. You're the key. You're the answer to this. Like you
Yeah.
get to choose what you actually want to receive from around you. And you do that by treating yourself that way first. And it's
Yes.
such a big, big lesson. And I don't know if I ever have a daughter, it'd be the first thing that I like hammer into her head because it's really, I can't even imagine how hard that is for other people to watch too, especially being like a conscious parent. I think both of us can say like we didn't really, like our parents weren't really aware of that, but being
Mm.
conscious parents, and really trying to create a different experience for our kids. I'm interested to kind of dive into how you move through motherhood, how that came to be. Because I know that you had your beautiful daughter young, and I feel like it's kind of like the first thing that we both bonded about too, because we
Yeah.
both had our first child at the same age. Like, how did that come to be? What was the relationship dynamic like between you and your partner? Like, what was that whole journey like for you? And like, do you have advice for people like moving through that for the first time? And just, yeah, I just want to kind of get into that and like how
Yeah.
spirituality like links into that for you. And was that the thing that kind of like made you want to progress and start like being a practitioner? Or yeah, anyway, 1,000 questions in
Yeah.
one, but I'm just gonna
I
like
love them
give it
all.
to you.
No, I love all these questions. And they're so important because motherhood shapes us so much. And I
Mm,
always knew, like, I had premonitions that I would have a child at 21. And and I was exactly the same age as my mum was when she gave birth to me, actually, which is pretty powerful. But
mm,
well, I met my now fiance on Tinder, actually. He was the first person that I matched with. And so, really? Oh, wait, I think we've had this conversation. Yeah, I'm like, this feels familiar. Yes, it's crazy, right? So he was the first
crazy.
person. I had Tinder when I was like, a little bit younger, and I deleted it. And when I moved down here, I
Yeah.
got it back again, and he was the first person I matched with. And honestly, like, you can imagine, right? I'm fresh 18 when I met him. I'm in the party zone. I'm
Did you
like,
know anyone down there?
I knew like one other person, a childhood friend, and she had also
Wow.
moved down here
Okay.
for uni, but we didn't really hang out too much. I ended up living with her for a little
Mhm.
bit because
Mhm.
the whole thing. So yeah, I when I matched with him, it was funny. Like he lived an hour away, and I just don't
Wow.
know. It was like one of those situations again where you're like, I'm just gonna do it. Like I'm not gonna think about it. I'm gonna do it. Would not recommend to anybody because it's like dangerous. I was all by myself, partying all
Mhm.
night, like cooked out of my brain. Went there, and I just we just kept hanging out night and after again, and it was really bizarre because he was the first guy that I was just like genuinely like, you are such a nice person. I didn't
Mm.
know that people like him existed, that somebody
Yeah.
who could care about me so deeply, but also like
Yeah.
know when to tell me to like find happiness for myself. I remember like he sat me down after a couple of years of dating and he's like, I love that I make you happy, but you have to find happiness for yourself because I can't do that for you. And I was like, what do you mean? I was just like, genuinely had no idea. I was so codependent on him. And he's been such an
Yeah.
amazing part of like me finding my own 2 feet and helping me do that by myself. So we got engaged about a year after we met, super in love, super just like naive about everything. But there was something in both of us where just we liked being together. And
Mm.
exactly a year after we got engaged, we had Madeline. So I would have actually fallen pregnant like when we
Just
got
after.
engaged.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool. But throughout that whole process, like I was, he was trying to get me to find things that I liked for myself and try and create my own life that didn't just revolve around him. And in that process, I was like, well, I don't know what I like. And so I kind of went on this self-development journey of like rediscovering myself. And that's where it all started. And
Mm.
then I started having panic attacks really badly, like to the point where I couldn't even go to work. I'd used up all of my sick days and my annual days, and I couldn't leave the house. It was just because all of this stuff was coming back up to the surface. And then I found out I was pregnant, and it propelled me even more to just keep pushing and do this work because I was like, I'm not going to have a child who doesn't have a mother, who doesn't know herself and can't hold space and can't help her walk this journey of life. So
Yeah.
I started to explore myself a little bit more in the spiritual sense and started to talk to my grandfather about what I was like as a kid and started to see spirit again and reconnect with my great grandmother and just re-explore that part of me. And it felt so good, like so good. It felt even better than doing something with my partner and, him giving me that happiness. It was just like pure. And if you're healing from
Mm.
codependency, you'll understand what that means. Like finding that source of happiness and joy within yourself is just like a feeling like no other. And I think that's what really kicked it off for me. And of course, my daughter is incredibly intuitive and incredibly psychic. So when I was pregnant with her, she enhanced all of that for me. And I had
Mhm.
premonitions again, and my third eye was like always buzzing. And all of these things just started to kind of come together. And for the first time in a really long time, I wasn't scared about what that meant. And I felt really safe and supported in what I was going through. Even though my partner, he was like, oh, woo woo stuff. Like he genuinely would just listen to me because he loved me. But I could see those eyes rolling in the back of his head. Like he's such a kind soul. But he was like, this bitch, like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. And so it's funny because, like, now, obviously, his opinion has definitely changed. I've spoken to his
Mhm.
grandparents in spirit, and, like, and he's just, like, very open to things now, which is really funny. But I think that's what really triggered it for me, going down this journey. And I also was like, I don't want to part of my shtick in life is like, I don't want to be at the helm of somebody else. And I've always wanted to pave my own path. And so creating my own business was really a way for me to do that. And I was like, this is something that I love so much. I love exploring myself spiritually, and I want to create a space where I can do that all the time. And so that's where, when I launched my business, when I was just a short time after I gave birth to my daughter. Oh.
I feel like it definitely was an ignition for you then. I also just want to say how very Sagittarius of your fiance to be like, you got to find your own happiness. Go on, go get your own stuff.
It's like lighting a fire under my ass, like, go that way. Like,
Very Sagittarius. Like,
I know.
this is my life. That's your life. We can share it, but you got to
Literally.
have your own stuff too.
Literally. But like, what a better person for me
Oh, yeah.
healing from codependency and just being
Oh, a
able to get
Pisces needs that.
a Pisces needs that so much, and I didn't realize
Yeah.
that. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
grateful. As much as I kicked my feet up about it, I was like, you don't love me? Like, why can't we have a life
Mm-hmm.
that's like entwined together? Like, that's the Pisces dream, right? We are one. But I can genuinely
Yes.
say, like,
We flow together,
yeah,
binded for the rest of our lives, never
for
leaves.
eternity. Literally.
Aww. I really do feel like you guys were sent to each other to lift each other and to challenge each other in a really good way. I know you've had your fair share of eye roll moments, as we both have, and there's any like most relationships do, but there's just something about that hearing your story that really emphasizes that like that evolution of not just you guys together, but also you help each other with your own individual identities so much.
Yeah.
And the fact that that also was the ignition and moving through, early motherhood and going out and finding what you actually liked and what you wanted to do and what you wanted to sort of like dive into and explore, and it's led you to this space. I think that that's really special. It's not something that was like you did out of, I think a lot of people do, or have entered this space out of boredom. Like they're not, what the fuck do I do? Like, well, what can
Yeah.
I learn about? I don't know. I'll go do this. I'll learn how to do that. It was so guided for you. And I
Yeah.
think that that's really beautiful. And it shines through with your energy a lot.
Thank
It just feels like pure and genuine and like really, I don't know. It's always like when I first met you, I'm like, this is like some divine intervention. I swear to God. And now we're here, and I'm like, oh, it makes sense now. Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. All right,
Yeah.
it makes sense. It's yeah, I think that it's really beautiful.
Thank you.
I I had a question that I wanted to ask, and it's gone, so I'm just going to keep carrying forward. But I would love to know, like, what are your goals for the next few years? Like, where do you see yourself in like 10 years? I'm gonna go there.
Oh my God, I'm like
I'm gonna go
sweaty
there.
palms. I genuinely am like, I'm fine talking about what happened to me in the past, true Pisces, but future, I'm like, oh, I don't know. Like, that's so scary. Um, I would love to be like, part of this is for safety reason, just in myself and because of my own story, but I would love to be fully self-sufficient financially and just
Mm-hmm.
have that business that is completely supporting me through every single journey of my life. Because I think the thing is too, like, there's a lot of healing that's gone on with money and
Mm.
having a business that supports me, and that has grown exponentially. But I'm ready to take it to that next level where it's like, it's not just supporting me, but it's supporting my family, and it's able to exist and grow beyond me. That would be super incredible, because I
Mm.
believe in businesses that have missions and that want to impact the world in a really positive way. And I want to be able to facilitate that not only for myself, but for other people as well. So that's definitely a big goal that's in play. And I've been working hard to see that into reality. I think now that I'm thinking about maternity leave, it's very sticky. And there's part of me that is like, can we do it? But then there's part of me that's like, we have to do it. Like, we don't really have any other option. This is what I want. I want to have my footprint on this world that makes a good impact. And I don't see why women have to have one or the other in terms of like being a mom or having a really successful career or business. And if you choose one or the other, there's nothing absolutely wrong with that. It's just for those women who want both, why not? Why can't we have both? And why can't they be just as successful and just as prosperous and just as joyful as the other? And I think as society and as a culture, we've really been ingrained hard that it's like you're either a good mom and your business is struggling, or you're either
Mm-hmm.
a really successful businesswoman and you're an awful mom who doesn't spend time with their kids. So I'm really trying to rewrite that. And yeah, but other than that, I do want to get married. We've been engaged for like 3 years now, and we just keep putting it off. It's a whole thing, and just I keep getting pregnant, and I'm like, I want to be able to drink, So I want to do that. That's a goal.
One day.
And of
One
course,
day.
I want to do like podcasts in person, and I want to
Mm.
travel, and yeah, I want to create a space that is really nurturing. I don't really like the environment that I'm in, like from an aesthetics point of view. And I think that as I come to learn who I am more and more and more, I'm finding that environment can be really supportive. And I think because of my journey, I've pushed environment to the side, and I've just been on this
Mm-hmm.
hellbent journey of like, you can do things your own way and environment doesn't matter and you can just push through. And so now I'm wanting to create that safe environment and that relaxing, peaceful environment. And I want to lean into that more and more and more. So that's definitely coming as well, I think, in terms of like a really beautiful home to live in.
Oh, that is so exciting. Oh my goodness. Please just make a podcast studio and I will live in it. And then you can just come see me on podcast days.
Perfect.
I'll
That
leave
would
my
be the
kids
dream.
and my partner.
Perfect.
I'll come back to them on weekends. I feel like that would be great.
Yes,
No, I'm joking.
totally.
I really do feel like aesthetics plays a huge role, and it does matter to a lot of creatives. And I feel like when you have the ability to actually have the eye for realizing that your space affects your creativity and your performance, then you actually are a creative person. And I feel like creative people don't give a fuck about that shit. So
Yeah.
that's it.
Totally.
I really want to dive into as well, um, like your transformation from when you were younger to how you are today. Because when I first met you, I was like, wow, this girl is young. She is young and she's so confident. She's so like, I just looked at you in awe because I was like, I wish I had that confidence. I wish I could like
Oh.
speak and compose myself how she does. Like, not in like a bad way, but I was like, she's fucking amazing. And I know that you very much not that way when you were growing up. So I'm just wondering like how you navigated that. Like what were you like as a child in terms of your confidence and how you presented yourself and how you've gotten to this point today, and maybe just some advice as well for people who have had similar journeys like that.
This is a good question. And thanks for saying that, because I think, you know, sometimes you need to get reflected back to you parts of you that you can't really see. I definitely
Yeah.
recognize, like, when I started my business, I was very good at playing a role. And sometimes that really helped me. Like, it was definitely a part of me. like holding space and being a practitioner, but there was this essence of like, I'm going to step into this now. And I think that's where my Leo midheaven and my North Node in Leo comes in,
Mm,
because it's like,
yeah.
it really helps me to be able to recognize that I'm stepping into a part of myself. It's not the whole part of myself. There's parts of myself that are still terrified and swear and like really human and messy and shadowy, and but
Yeah.
there are parts of myself, and I love stepping into those that are confident and believe. And I think where a lot of people kind of get overwhelmed or feel like they're experiencing imposter syndrome is like they believe that their whole self has to be this confident person that can step out on stage or be on social media. And it's like, why does that have to be the whole part of you? It's a part of you, totally, but every other aspect of your life gives it more texture, more flavor, more personality. It makes you who you are. And I think it's sad. And I get it, but it's sad that we push those parts of us to the side and think that they shouldn't exist because we want to be a part of ourselves that's more confident or more, you know, more talented in a particular area. I think that's what's really helped me, to be honest, because looking back, like as a teenager in particular, I remember like being in the classroom and having a panic attack because I wanted to cough. Like I genuinely hated
Oh,
attention on me. I genuinely
oh.
hated like people looking at me or talking about me, and it made me feel super uncomfortable and just yuck in my skin, because once again I didn't have that self-validation that like, well, it doesn't matter what they're saying
Mm,
about you, doesn't matter how they're treating you or what they're gossiping about or what they think you've done or whatever. It's about who you know you are. And at that time I
mm-hmm.
didn't have that, and so there was a lot of like self-harm in many different areas of my life, and sheltering away and not connecting with other people. Like friendships are super hard for me because I get scared of like, well, what if they see a part of me that they don't like? And that is terrifying, because I think that especially as a teenager, you're looking for people to love you and accept you. And I know there are definitely people out there who have that whole like stick it to the man, like I don't really care if you don't love me.
Mm,
But I think we all look for
yeah.
love, and I think as a teenager we're very vulnerable, we're very open. And so I think when I became a mom and I fell pregnant, that was a really big entryway into recognizing that like I have to do this for me. I have to be my own person. I have to be able to guide myself through these experiences, and I can't be afraid of being seen, because my daughter will see me. She'll see the parts of me
Mm,
that I don't even want to see, and she does now, and it's
mm,
terrifying.
yeah.
But now I'm like, I love myself and I care about my journey. I care about who I am and I care about the path that I'm walking. And that to me is enough for me to say, I'm going to do these scary things and I'm going to get in front of a camera and I'm going to go on social media. I'm going to use my voice. I'm going to talk about things that I know intellectually that other people turn their nose down about. That doesn't matter to me anymore because I have self-belief. It doesn't mean that I don't get scared. It just means that like there's enough fuel in the fire of like where I'm walking compared to where I don't want to walk. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does make sense. That's a huge transformation to move through in in reality if we look at our life in such a short amount of time. Like that window of time is actually so little compared to the makeup
Yeah.
of your whole life and what it will be. So to move through that during that time, it's like imagine where you're going to be in like another 10 years and then another 10
I
years
know.
after that, like you're going to be like in TED doing talks. Like it's insane, just moving through that and witnessing it in someone who is still so young. Like when I met you I was like, what? She's so young. Like how is she talking like this? How does she, like, just your the way that you connect with people, I've never met anyone like as young as you who has done that in such a genuine, real way without just pretending like they know what they're doing or that they're like connecting with people. It's so real. It's like I feel like you're my big sister,
It's
which is
so funny.
wild.
Yeah, it's
Like
so
I feel like you're
funny.
my older sister.
I get that a
That's
lot. And you know
crazy.
what? I used to kick my feet up about that. Like, I would refuse to tell people my age because I knew that they would just see me differently. Because the truth is, I
Mm,
genuinely, and I've always said this, I do not feel my age. But I also
yeah.
think, like, I've got
You look at that you
Pluto.
might not feel like
Yeah, thank you. Like,
bitch.
probably if you heard me get up off the couch and hear all my bones crack, maybe you'd be like, "Oh yeah, I get." I get she's like old now,
We're
but
both
no,
in that club.
literally bones cracking. But I would hate telling people my age because I'd always get that, and I don't
Mm,
know. I think it's so funny. I also think that's a big attribute to having Pluto and Scorpio in the first house and just constantly going through that death
mm,
and rebirth. And I think, you know
yeah.
what? It's funny that you say, like, imagine where you're going to be in 10 years. Like, I think that's why I find it so hard to not just like not manifest, but to think about things so far in advance because I've changed so much. Like, I genuinely have shifted so much and so many times in my life that I'm like,
Mm,
I kind of want to ride this journey. I know where my North Star is, but I'm keen to just see how it all
yeah.
opens up and falls into place, you know?
Yeah. And also enjoy this present moment that like you've created everything around you and within you right now
Yeah.
from this little girl who has moved through so much trauma and you're here now today. I can understand why also you would feel that you just want to enjoy where you're at too, instead
Yeah.
of always just looking towards where you want to be, where you're going, because you
Yeah.
have built so much around you and within you to hold you where you're at right now, which is like eons but like in front of where anyone else is mindset wise. Like it's insane. I can understand why you feel that way.
Mm.
Yeah, I can really truly I see you.
Thank you.
It's yeah, it's a big one. Um I also just like I know that we're kind of running out of time right now, but I also just want to ask you like is there some like a thing like what is one thing that people like really misunderstand about you? Because I feel like that's such a good question that you asked me during our
Mm.
interview, and it was a really interesting one. So I'm keen to see what you feel about that.
Because I haven't had many friendships, I found this question like really hard. I was actually reflecting on it after I asked you the other week, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I find this really hard. I've had more and more friendships as an adult, and it's funny because I asked them, they've all been like my fiance's friends who he's grown up with. And they have been so beautiful and so amazing. And they're honestly like the most, like, makes me want to cry. Like, they're the most amazing people ever. And I have come to be really, really close with them. And having those friendships has been so healing on so many levels. But it's funny because I've asked like a few of them, like, what did you think of me like when you first met me? And they've all said like, I thought you hated me. Like, I thought you were such a bitch. Like, I thought like you genuinely couldn't care if
Ah,
I fell off the face of the planet. I'm like, that could not be more wrong because I
it's
would
that rising
literally
score.
yes, exactly. But people think that I'm just like, and I get this, like I work in a co-working space in my financial planning job, and I get that now why people aren't always like approaching me. I'll see like other people in, talking to each other or whatever. I'm like, why does nobody come up to me? And I'm just constantly walking around with this like resting bitch face, and I wear black all the time to just repel people. And now I get it. So I think that is like the biggest misconception because I genuinely care about people so much. But yeah.
Uh, yeah, I feel you. I have a resting bitch face.
Yes, you do.
It's not great. Yeah, I do. My son took a photo of me the other day while I was watching TV without me knowing, and my face was like,
Why are you mad at the TV, Mum?
I'm like, girl, relax that forehead.
Oh God,
Tell
that
that
was so
frown to
funny.
chill. Oh yeah, I
I'm
feel
just
you.
like, it
It's
feels comfortable.
funny. I can't even imagine thinking of you that way.
Yeah, it's funny.
I can't imagine. You're just
It's
such a
pretty funny.
soft, like feminine force in my life. Well, you have been. I can't even imagine you. Like I see you for the Pisces that you are, not for the rising Scorp all the time. I mean, she
Yeah.
comes out, don't get me wrong, like a fucking force field. But I don't know. It's crazy. I can't even imagine you like mad yet.
Yes. My
Yet.
fiance would beg to differ. He'd be like, I don't know where this soft, beautiful Pisces is. Where is she?
Oh my
Poor guy.
goodness. Well, I feel like this has been so nice just to learn more about you, and I feel like I've learned so much during this time as well. I can take that and put it into my little Tanita file and
Like the Virgo you are.
into my little Virgo filing system. It's just, yeah, thank you so much for sharing with us. I think it has been beautiful. And I know that everyone listening is going to be so grateful that you have just shared a few different aspects of yourself with us today. So, on behalf of everyone listening and myself, I just want to say thank you for being so vulnerable with us. I think that this was really special. Um, and we'd love to know what everyone thinks. So if you're listening to this right now, please jump in with your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions. We want to know how you felt listening to this. I think this is such a beautiful idea to do these interview style episodes. I think they were very, very overdue.
Yes.
But I feel like I don't think we would have even done this if we wanted to at the
Yeah.
beginning of this podcast, because this space has been such a transformational space for both of us. And
Yeah.
yeah, I just don't think we would have done it, and we would have shared anywhere near as much as we have. So yeah, I'm just really grateful
Definitely.
for you.
Oh, I'm grateful
Yeah.
for you. Thanks for holding space and like letting me go through that journey. It was very healing. I think we don't reflect enough, right? I think
Hmm.
it's important to
Yeah.
reflect on the journey and the
Hmm.
transformations that we go through because it can be so powerful and so healing. So thank you. I really appreciate it. And thanks for everybody holding space and listening. I love you guys. Of course, I want to hear about your own transformations too. Like this is
Yeah.
a space to share. I want to hear about what's something big that you've moved through that you're really proud of, because I think we should celebrate each other and the transformations that we've been through. It's important. It's
I
important
think so.
to do that for each other.
It is really, really important. I'd love to. We would love to hear about it. Um, and excited to chat with you guys again next week, as usual, 9 a.m. on Mondays. You can find us over on YouTube as well, and on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and of course, our little home hub, Divinely Human Podcast on Instagram. And wishing you guys all a beautiful, abundant, and prosperous week. And we'll chat to you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.